Okay, welcome back to another video from H Computers Tips and Reviews. This is picking right back up on Hyper-V Manager. This is the OS part. I've already gone through and done a video, pretty short one probably, on the screen capture of installing your virtual switches. Go into your settings. In here you have whatever settings you need. If you need to add an additional NIC or remove a NIC, change the NIC. Okay, virtual. Went through this earlier. Connect, settings. We just went into settings. Start. Starting it actually starts the virtualization of the OS. Actually gets it to run. Connecting is actually going and seeing the screen, because you might not need to connect to a virtual machine. What you might actually just need to do is run it, depending on the processes that thing is doing. Hit connect. I got an error I can see on the screen already. Gives you a little box preview of what's going on. That's a new one for me. Let's go ahead and just simply shut it down. Stop it from running. You can actually remove these at any time. You just hit remove, you can delete it. Let's create a new. Basically, it's going to verify it. If you don't have it already downloaded, it's going to download that ISO, save that ISO, then it's going to install. The basic installation goes through. The system's a little slower than the ones I've been doing it on, so it takes a little bit of time. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of settings to do when you go through the quick install. You can go in and install new. You can choose where you want it to save, what size. A lot of those settings you can go in and preset them before you install it. But now you can go in and install and do it later and change those settings, because maybe you're going to install a security server software or something of that sort, where you're going to go in and you're going to say, okay, I have 50 clients that need to use this, so I got to have 3 CPUs dedicated to it. And then all of a sudden you're going to have 100 computers connected to that. You might need to go in and change those settings. You just simply stop the software, stop the OS from running, go in, do what you got to do, change those settings, start it back up. You can save. Saving it will help to speed up of the OS, virtual OS, again, when you restart, there's very little to do from the Hyper-V side, but from the OS side, you have a lot of things you can do. It's a standard operating system. Once you do these settings and you can do a checkpoint, it's basically like a restore point in the OS that will help you out for in case you have an issue with that. Depending on what you're going to do with your virtual machines, depending on what you want to do. These variables are pretty big. Might not be a Windows OS, it might be a different kind of OS. It can be server, it can be anything you really want to load on there. And again, if you're loading a Windows OS or something that has to have a registry key, you're going to need that registry key. You're going to need another registry key because it is another version or another system running Windows. It's not going to be the same system because now it's a virtual machine that you can actually name differently. You can actually give it a system name that you can actually see on your network, on your domain. Maybe you just want to save some files. You want to transfer things around and you need a virtual location or a standard location where you can move some stuff and have it separately from your OS. Mentioned maybe for gamers, if you want to move your email and you want to move a lot of other things off of your system, where when you're gaming you can actually shut this virtual machine down and not have it use any of your resources, because then you don't have Office in there looking for email, you don't have your browsers trying to update, you don't have a lot of other things. They're all on a different OS. So it might be one of those little areas that you might be interested in. But again, you have to make sure you have Pro Edition. See if I can get this to start up this time. And again, when you install this is a clean installation. You're going to have to go through all the same things you do on the first time you install Windows. So I'm going to ask you for your admin name, your username, your passwords, all of those type of things you're going to need to set up. So having all that information is handy to have. Just want everybody to be able to see this is not really a difficult task. If you installed Windows before, you'll have no issues with this. It's just you install Windows and you want 3 NICs onto what network, how you want each NIC to communicate. If you want DHCP, you want a fixed IP, those type of things is now going to come down to the OS side. And that was kind of the thing that took me a long time to figure out is, okay, well, I can get my host computer to have a fixed IP all through the driver's, not the driver setting, but the actual NIC card configuration. But you don't get your virtual machines to get a fixed IP from that location. So it took me a while to research this and find out you do it from your virtual machine. Because a lot of the instructions tell you, oh yeah, if you want a fixed IP, just input it when you install the software. Not realizing what they're telling you is in the actual setup files for the software you're dealing with is where you go in and you edit the virtual Ethernet that is in that machine to get the fixed IP. Come on, machine. Just gotta wait for this to set up. Hope everybody likes all the content this year. Hopefully this will be some useful information out there for some people, especially if you're in a small business, medium business, even if you're at home contemplating getting into some stuff, programming, design, anything of that sort. You might want to be in a virtual environment to have your virtual machine. Maybe have all your Maybe you're doing work environment where you have to run a Linux or some other operating system than your base you have, so you can do coding or any of that type of stuff, to do any kind of software testing, any of that type of stuff. You can actually do it from the virtual machine, and it's actually your physical machine. It's not a separate machine, because that's what we used to do in the old days. You'd have two machines, you'd have a little box to switch your keyboard back and forth. You have two monitors, you have one thing hooked up to one, you have, two different setups. But now you don't have to do that. So it was really an interesting concept, not to mention the future growth of your system. Now you can use it for more. So again, once you load up the OS part, it's going to ask you all the basic questions of a clean installation. I don't know if maybe there's not a lot of people that have done a clean installation. As you can tell, it asks you to enter a username or password. One of the things they recommend in security nowadays is not to enter all this information, because if you're a targeted person in a business, people can actually research this information, these questions, for spear phishing and all of those type of things, to try to guess and figure out what the security key passwords are so that they can get your password. Nowadays everybody's on media, streaming medias, all these type of things out there. They're going to figure out, oh, what's your child's first name? Where were you born? Where were you raised? You have that all out there. People can find that information. There's public records out there. So to be careful on what you enter in there is a new recommendation. but that's part of security. I don't know if you're really going to need to know a lot of that with virtual server, but because it's 2023 down the rabbit hole, that brings up the whole nother subject where you go down a whole nother story of all kinds of stuff that is possible. And from this point, it is creating a whole new Windows installation. And everybody knows how quick and how speedy that is. You can see it. And again, this doesn't have to be a Windows 10, Windows 11. It can be a server environment. It can be a different, could be Linux, could be Ubuntu, it could be anything you want to install. It could be multiple Windows 10, multiple 11, multiple servers. And again, you'll need the activation keys. You'll need that type of stuff. Some of those security installations, it comes on a Ubuntu or Linux or something of that sort. When you get that virtual server download, usually they have the activation and all that that's with that, so you don't have to worry about the licensing and all of that virtual machine. But this is always the fun part, is to wait for the first installation and all of that type of stuff. You're almost there. Whoa, there you go. Of course, down here telling me what I have, what's installed, license expired, so that means you need to do a license. And here is kind of a cross between OS settings and Hyper-V settings. If you go down here, it will actually tell you what memory you're using, your network. Didn't I add a second? Oh, I did not. Everybody just saw I added that second network. Here it's telling you. Network 2, do you want to find it? Look at that. You have 2 NIC cards identified. You can add another one, get a third. If anybody paid attention to earlier to what network it was on, default gateway, it's connected to the internet. I can go on the internet with this now. Hey look, there's a YouTube channel. The virtual machine is online. So wanted to go through and show that. All of that has to do with those settings there. Now if you want to give it a fixed IP, I'm sure everybody knows how to do that. You go into the Ethernet, go into properties. You can set if it's on a private, public, that's security wise. dhcp, you can go in here, set it this way. Usually I have issues with that. Ethernet 2. Notice what it says down here. So that's some of the interesting parts of it, that really a lot of things kind of changed. But you can go in, give it the fixed IP here. This is how the virtual machine will get that fixed IP to go out and you can get it on the network. This is where all that's done. So wanted to go through and show that, because this is really all there really is to the OS. You got the OS up and running. You can load multiple of them. But the hard part is to know, for this to have more NICs, this is where you needed to put it in. But the NIC you're going to get is actually a virtual switch that you need to configure. This virtual switch then communicates to the physical NIC on the host machine. Now onto this machine. You can tell it where you want to talk to, which one of these you want to talk to. So that was the interesting concept of it. Took me a little bit to grasp. Maybe someone out there is kind of stuck on this little point, and it's not really that big of a deal to, once you figure it out, that go, oh, okay, now I'm understanding how all that's set up, what's going on. Maybe you have virtual servers that are all running on the same IP. That would be due to what your settings are, and if you have a fixed IP set here, that everything's going to go through that 30 or that 25 IP address because that's what you set. Not necessarily that it's a bad thing, because it's going through a virtual switch that's then handling all the traffic. But if you want to have a 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 all on that one server, all being different virtual servers and host server, there's the different settings, there's the way to set it up. So that took me a while to grasp all that. Took me a while to do all these videos to explain all that, because there wasn't a whole lot of clear information out there, and I wanted to do videos to break them all down. So again, thank you all for watching. That should wrap up the 3 capture videos. Go back, watch them. Go back, watch the other videos so you can actually see the hardware side of it, how it is actually set up, and understand what the differences are between these settings. To understand when you have the NIC and you have the virtual switch, where that virtual switch is actually sitting on that physical connection on that network. Alrighty, thank you all so much for watching. I'm going to wrap this up.